Elena Carter grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. The streets were quiet, the fields were wide, and the stars at night seemed brighter than anywhere else. She was a simple girl who loved music more than anything. When other kids played games outside, Elena would sit near her window singing softly to herself, pretending she was standing on a big stage somewhere far away. Her family didn't have much. Her mother worked long hours at the bakery, and her father fixed cars in their small garage. Life was ordinary, but when Elena sang, everything felt brighter. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried something gentle, something that made people stop and listen for a second. Still, not everyone saw it that way. In school, Elena joined the choir. It was the only place she felt like she belonged. She loved how voices came together, blending like colors in a painting. But one person always made her doubt herself. Her music teacher, Mr. Harlan. He was strict and rarely smiled. He had been teaching for many years, and he believed talent was something you were born with, not something you could grow. The first time Elena sang in front of him, she was nervous. Her hands were shaking as she held the paper with the lyrics. She sang a simple song, one she had practiced for days. When she finished, she looked up, waiting for his reaction. Mr. Harlan just nodded slightly and said, "You're fine, but you don't stand out. Maybe singing isn't really your thing." Those words hit her harder than she expected. She forced a small smile and sat down quietly, pretending it didn't matter. But inside, her heart sank. From that day, she began to hear his words every time she sang. "You'll never be enough." Still, she didn't stop. She practiced every evening after dinner, sometimes until her voice went hoarse. Her mother would peek into her room and say, "Sweetheart, take a break. You've got a lovely voice, but you need to rest." Elena would smile and say, "Just one more song, Mom." It wasn't about being perfect. It was about feeling alive when she sang. As the years went by, the world around her started to change. Some of her friends left town to study or work in the city. Elena stayed behind, helping her parents and working part-time at a local diner. But her dream never faded. She'd sing while wiping tables or washing dishes, humming softly to the rhythm of her heart. The customers often smiled, leaving bigger tips when she sang. A few even told her, "You've got something special, dear." Those small words kept her going, but not everyone saw her talent. One afternoon, as she sang while cleaning the counter, her old teacher, Mr. Harlan, walked in for coffee. She froze when she saw him. It had been years since high school, but his face hadn't changed much. Serious, tired, always judging. He looked at her for a moment and said, "Still singing, I see." His tone wasn't kind or cruel, just flat. She smiled politely and said, "Yes, I still love it." He gave a short nod. "Well, love doesn't always mean talent. Some people aren't meant for the stage." Then he walked away. After he left, Elena stood there, her heart heavy. She wanted to forget his words, but they echoed in her head. Maybe he was right. Maybe she wasn't good enough. That night when she tried to sing, her voice broke halfway through the song. She sat down on her bed, tears filling her eyes. For the first time, she thought about giving up. But then something strange happened. As she sat there, her mother knocked on the door and came in holding an old photo. It was a picture of Elena as a little girl, standing on a chair, singing with her eyes closed and her hands in the air. "You've been singing since before you could read," her mother said softly. "Don't let anyone make you forget who you are." Elena looked at the photo for a long time. That little girl didn't care who was listening. She sang because it made her happy. Somewhere along the way, she had forgotten that feeling. She realized she had been singing for approval, for people like Mr. Harlan, instead of for herself. The next morning, she woke up early, opened her window, and started singing again. The morning air was cool, and her voice floated across the quiet neighborhood. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. A few birds joined in, and she smiled. For the first time in months, she felt free. Days turned into weeks, and Elena kept singing even when no one listened. She recorded herself on her old phone and posted the videos online, though she never expected anyone to watch them. She sang in the diner, she sang while walking home, and sometimes she sang just to the wind. The more she sang, the less she cared about what others thought. Slowly, her confidence began to grow again. Then one afternoon, a group of college students stopped by the diner. They were travelers, stopping in town on their way to the city. As Elena brought their food, one of them asked, "Hey, were you the one singing just now?" She blushed and nodded. That was beautiful, another said. You should be performing somewhere, not here. Elena laughed softly. Maybe someday. Their words lit something inside her. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe she didn't need permission to chase her dream. That night after her shift ended, she looked online and found a flyer for a local talent showcase. The sign-up fee was small and the event was open to anyone. She hesitated at first. What if she embarrassed herself? What if Mr. Harlan showed up again? But another thought followed. What if this was her chance? She filled out the form and hit send before she could change her mind. Her heart was racing, her palms sweaty. But deep down she knew this was something she needed to do. Not for fame, not for revenge, but for herself. The next few weeks were filled with practice. Every evening after work, she stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing her song. It was one she had written herself, about believing again after being told you never could. Her voice cracked sometimes, but she kept going. When fear crept in, she reminded herself of the little girl in the photo, fearless, happy, free. Her friends at the diner noticed her change. She seemed lighter, brighter. One of them asked, "You look excited these days. What's going on?" Elena smiled shyly and said, "I signed up for something big." They all cheered for her, offering to come and support her at the showcase. But as the big day drew closer, her old doubts began to whisper again. What if she failed? What if she wasn't good enough? The night before the event, she could barely sleep. She stood by her window looking out at the moon and softly sang the song she'd practiced. It was her way of calming her nerves, reminding herself why she started. In that quiet moment, she made herself a promise. No matter what happens tomorrow, she would sing with her whole heart. She would sing for every time she was told she couldn't. She would sing for the girl who never stopped dreaming. And somewhere deep down, she hoped that maybe, just maybe, the world was finally ready to listen. The morning of the showcase came faster than Elena expected. She woke up before sunrise, her stomach turning with a mix of excitement and fear. The air outside was cool and quiet, the kind of morning that felt like it was holding its breath. She stood in front of her small mirror, brushing her hair and whispering to herself, "You can do this." But deep down, her heart was racing so fast she could barely breathe. Her mother knocked softly on the door and came in holding a small necklace. It was a simple silver pendant shaped like a star. "Your grandmother gave me this when I was your age," she said, fastening it around Elena's neck. "For luck. You'll shine just like this little star." Elena smiled, trying to hide her nerves. "Thanks, Mom. I'll try my best." The showcase was being held at the town's community center. It wasn't fancy, but for a small place like theirs, it was the biggest event of the year. People from nearby towns would come to watch, cheer, and sometimes laugh when a performance didn't go well. As Elena walked toward the building, she could already hear the buzz of the crowd inside. She clutched the paper with her registration number, her palms sweaty. A few performers stood near the entrance, chatting and laughing confidently. They looked like they belonged there, polished, sure of themselves, dressed beautifully. Elena's dress was simple, one she had borrowed from a friend. She felt out of place. For a moment, she thought about turning around and walking back home. But then she remembered why she was there. She wasn't doing this for applause or trophies. She was doing it for the little girl who used to sing with her heart wide open. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of wood polish and old curtains. On the stage, a group of dancers was finishing their routine, while the audience clapped politely. Elena found a chair in the corner and waited for her turn. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the microphone she'd brought from home to practice with. Her throat felt dry. As she sat there, someone familiar caught her eye. Mr. Harlan. He was sitting among the judges at the front, his reading glasses resting on the edge of his nose. Elena's stomach dropped. She hadn't expected him to be here. For a second, she felt her courage slipping away. Memories of his harsh words came flooding back. "You don't stand out. Singing isn't your thing." She closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. Maybe this was a sign to leave, to save herself from the embarrassment. But then she heard her name being called over the microphone. It was too late to back out. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling heavy, and walked toward the stage. The lights were brighter than she expected, almost blinding. The host smiled at her and whispered, "Good luck," before stepping aside. The room went silent. Dozens of eyes were on her, waiting. She gripped the microphone tightly, her hands shaking. For a moment, she couldn't move. Her heart pounded so loudly that she thought everyone could hear it. Somewhere in the crowd, she spotted her mother sitting in the second row, smiling softly and giving her a small nod. That was all she needed. She took a deep breath and began to sing. The first few notes came out shaky, like her voice was trapped behind her nerves. A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. But as the music flowed, something inside her began to change. Her voice steadied. She closed her eyes and let the song carry her. It was a song she had written herself about falling down and standing up again. The lyrics were simple, but they came from a place of truth. From every moment she had doubted herself, every word that had made her feel small. She sang about finding strength in broken places, about not letting fear define who you are. By the second verse, the room had grown completely silent. Even the judges who had been whispering to each other moments before were now still. Her voice wasn't powerful in the traditional way, but it was full of emotion, raw and real. Every note seemed to carry a piece of her story. When she reached the final chorus, she opened her eyes and looked straight ahead. Her voice soared higher than she thought it could, filling the entire room. And when the last note faded, there was a moment of stillness, a heartbeat of pure silence before the audience erupted into applause. Elena stood there, breathless, trying to process what had just happened. People were clapping, some even standing. She saw her mother wiping tears from her eyes. And then she saw Mr. Harlan. He wasn't clapping at first, just staring at her with an unreadable expression. Then slowly he stood and brought his hands together in applause. Elena's throat tightened. For years she had dreamed of this moment, not of fame or trophies, but of proving to herself that she was enough, that her voice mattered. After her performance, she stepped backstage, still shaking. A few other contestants came up to her, smiling and congratulating her. "That was beautiful," one of them said. "You made me cry." Elena thanked them softly, still feeling like she was floating. A few minutes later, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned around and found Mr. Harlan standing there. His face was softer than she remembered. "I have to admit," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "I was wrong about you." Elena blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "What?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "When you were in my class, I didn't see what was in front of me. You've got something real, something you can't teach." For a second, he looked almost embarrassed. "I'm sorry if I ever made you doubt yourself." Elena didn't know what to say. The man whose words had haunted her for years was now apologizing. She simply nodded and said, "Thank you." And for the first time, she meant it. Because now she didn't need his approval. She already had her own. When the showcase ended, the host called her name again. She had won second place, but to Elena it felt like first. The audience cheered as she walked back on stage to receive her small trophy. She looked out at the crowd and saw her mother smiling proudly, tears still shining in her eyes. After the event, as people were leaving, several strangers came up to Elena to tell her how much her song had moved them. "You have a gift," one woman said, squeezing her hand. "Don't ever stop singing." That night, when Elena got home, she placed the trophy on her small desk and stared at it for a long time. It wasn't about the award, it was about what it represented. The girl who had once been too scared to sing in front of anyone had just bared her soul on stage and made people feel something. She lay in bed, still hearing the sound of the applause echoing in her head. But the most important sound of all was her own voice, strong, steady, and finally free. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was chasing a dream that didn't belong to her. She was living it, one note at a time. Over the next few days, people in town stopped her on the street to congratulate her. Some asked if she was planning to sing again at the next showcase. A few even asked if she'd teach their children to sing. Elena smiled every time. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing: she wasn't going to stop. She started recording more songs, using the little equipment she had. Her friends from the diner helped her film small videos to share online. She didn't expect anything big, but she wanted to keep creating, keep growing. And slowly people began to notice. Messages from strangers started appearing in her inbox. Kind words, encouragement, stories from others who had once been told they weren't enough. Every message made her realize that music wasn't just about notes or lyrics. It was about connection, about healing, about finding light in the darkest places. One evening, as she sat by her window watching the sunset, Elena thought about how far she'd come. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, "Maybe being told I wasn't enough was the best thing that ever happened to me, because now I know what it means to believe in myself." The sky outside was turning golden, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the faint sound of someone playing a guitar. She closed her eyes and began to hum along. The world suddenly felt bigger, full of possibilities. And this time she wasn't afraid to dream. Weeks passed after the showcase, and life slowly returned to normal for Elena. But something inside her had changed. The girl who once sang in her room with fear now walked with quiet confidence. She no longer sang just to prove herself. She sang because it made her feel alive. Her small-town life hadn't suddenly turned glamorous, but it felt different now. The world that once seemed small began to open up little by little. Every morning before work, she would stand by her window, singing softly as the sun rose. The neighbors sometimes heard her and smiled when they passed by. At the diner, customers started asking her to sing while they ate. At first she was shy, but soon her voice became part of the place's charm. People would stop in not just for coffee, but to hear her sing. One afternoon, as she wiped down tables after a busy lunch rush, a man approached her counter. He was in his mid-30s, dressed casually with kind eyes and a notebook in his hand. "You're Elena, right?" he asked with a friendly smile. She nodded, surprised. "Yes, that's me. Do I know you?" "Not yet," he said, laughing lightly. "I'm Daniel. I was at the showcase a few weeks ago. You sang that song, and the one you wrote yourself. It was incredible." Her cheeks warmed. "Oh, thank you. I didn't think anyone would remember that." "I remembered," he said. "Actually, I work with a few local musicians. We're putting together a small concert next month. Just local talent. I'd love for you to be part of it." Elena froze for a moment. "A concert? Like on stage again?" He nodded. "Yes, nothing fancy, just a community event. But it's a good chance to share your voice." Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part of her hesitated. The showcase had been terrifying, even though it turned out well. Could she really do it again? Sensing her doubt, Daniel smiled gently. "You don't have to decide now. Think about it. I'll leave my number in case you're interested." He handed her a small card and left. For the rest of the day, Elena kept glancing at it. A concert. Another stage. Another chance. But also in another crowd, another moment where she could fail. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by her window again, holding her guitar, thinking. She whispered to herself, "You've done this before. You can do it again." And deep down, she knew she wanted to. The next morning, she sent Daniel a message. "I'll do it." The following weeks were a blur of preparation. Daniel introduced her to a few other musicians, a drummer, a guitarist, and a keyboard player. They met in an old warehouse that had been turned into a rehearsal space. It smelled of dust and old wood, but it felt magical. The first time she sang with them, the sound filled the room in a way she'd never experienced before. It was different from singing alone. Their music lifted her voice higher and her heart raced with excitement. Still, the nerves were there. Some nights she'd lie awake worrying that she wasn't good enough. Sometimes she'd make small mistakes during rehearsals and immediately apologize. "Sorry," she'd say, "I'll get it right next time." Daniel would always smile and say, "You're already doing great. Elena, don't be so hard on yourself." Slowly, she began to trust herself more. She even started writing a new song for the concert, one that told her story. Every lyric came from a real place, from the pain and hope she'd carried all those years. When she shared it with the group, they listened quietly. When she finished, Daniel said softly, "That's the one. You need to sing that." The day of the concert arrived faster than she expected. The event was outdoors, set up in the park at the center of town. Strings of lights hung between the trees, and a small stage had been built near the fountain. Families, friends, and couples filled the grass with blankets and chairs. The air buzzed with excitement. Elena stood behind the stage, her heart racing. She peeked out and saw the crowd, much larger than the one at the showcase. Her hands were cold and she kept rubbing them together to stop them from shaking. "You okay?" Daniel asked beside her. She nodded, though her throat felt dry. "Just nervous," he smiled reassuringly. "That's good. It means you care." Then he handed her a bottle of water. "Just sing the way you always do. The rest will follow." When her turn came, she walked onto the stage under the soft glow of the lights. The crowd clapped politely as she adjusted the microphone. She looked around and saw familiar faces. Her mother sitting in the front row, some friends from the diner, even a few people from her old school. And then, near the back, she saw Mr. Harlan again. Her breath caught for a moment, but this time she didn't feel fear. She felt something stronger, peace. She smiled to herself and nodded to the band. The music started softly, a gentle rhythm that wrapped around her like a warm hug. She took a deep breath and began to sing her new song. Her voice was calm and steady, full of emotion. The lyrics spoke about finding courage, about chasing dreams even when no one believes in you. It was her story, laid bare for everyone to hear. As she sang, the crowd grew quiet. Some swayed gently to the music, others just listened with tears in their eyes. Her mother sat still, her hand over her heart. Daniel played beside her, smiling proudly. Even Mr. Harlan had a softened look on his face. By the final verse, the entire park felt still, as if the world had paused to listen. The night breeze brushed against her face, and for a moment, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. When she finished, there was a heartbeat of silence, and then the audience erupted in applause. The sound washed over her like a wave. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed with emotion. People were cheering, whistling, standing to clap. Someone shouted, "You're amazing." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were happy ones. After the concert, strangers came up to her, thanking her for the song. One woman said, "That song felt like my life. You don't know how much it meant to hear it." Elena hugged her without thinking. It was in that moment she realized that her music wasn't just for her anymore. It was for everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. Later that night, as the crowd started to leave and the lights dimmed, Daniel approached her. "You were incredible," he said. "You have something real, Elena. People can feel it." She smiled shyly. "Thank you. I still can't believe it happened." He chuckled. "Believe it. And start getting ready for the next one, because people are going to want more." Elena laughed, though her heart still felt full. As she walked home, the night air was cool and the sound of applause still echoed faintly in her ears. She held her guitar close and whispered, "Thank you," not sure if she was talking to herself, to fate, or to the little girl she once was. When she reached home, her mother was waiting on the porch. "I saw you up there," she said, eyes shining with pride. "You looked so free." Elena smiled and hugged her tightly. "I felt free, Mom." Inside her small room, she set her guitar down and looked around. Everything was the same. The worn desk, the old window, the photo of her younger self. But she knew she wasn't the same girl anymore. She had faced her fears, stood on 2 stages, and shared her heart with strangers. And each time she sang, she grew a little braver. Before going to bed, she took out her notebook and began writing again. New words flowed easily, songs about love, hope, and courage. She didn't know where her journey would lead, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She trusted the music to guide her. Outside, the night was quiet except for the soft chirping of crickets. Elena sat by her window humming the melody of her next song. The same stars she had looked at since she was a child shimmered above her. She smiled softly and whispered, "This is just the beginning." The weeks after the concert were some of the happiest days Elena had ever known. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. They smiled, waved, and told her how much they loved her song. Even the older folks who never came to events started coming by the diner just to hear her sing again. For the first time, she felt like she was part of something bigger. Her music wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who listened. Daniel kept his promise. He invited her to more small shows, sometimes in nearby towns, sometimes in little cafes or parks. The crowds were never huge, but they were real and they listened. Every performance made her stronger, more confident. Her voice grew deeper, her emotions richer. She was learning to tell stories through her songs, not just sing them. But along with the good came new challenges. Traveling between towns was tiring. She still had to work at the diner to help her parents, which meant late nights and early mornings. Some days her voice would ache and she'd wonder if she was pushing herself too hard. Yet even on those tough days, she couldn't imagine stopping. Every time she stepped on stage, every time someone came up after a show to say her song meant something to them, it reminded her why she started. One evening, after a long day, she sat with Daniel outside the rehearsal space. They had just finished practicing a new song. The air was cool and the sunset painted the sky in soft orange and pink. Daniel looked at her and said, You know, Elena, you've come a long way since that first showcase. She smiled, looking down at her hands. Sometimes I can't believe it's real, he nodded. It's real. You made it happen. You believed, even when no one else did. She paused for a moment, thinking about everything that had led her here. Do you ever feel scared? She asked. Like, what if it all disappears one day? Daniel chuckled softly. All the time. But the trick is to sing like it could be your last time on stage. That way, even if it ends, you'll know you gave it everything. Those words stayed with her. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. A local radio host reached out after hearing her song online. He wanted to interview her and play her song on the air. Elena couldn't believe it. She had listened to that radio station her whole life. The idea that her voice would be on it made her heart race. The day of the interview, she dressed carefully, nervous but excited. The studio was small, filled with cables, microphones, and posters of famous singers. The host, a kind middle-aged man named Peter, greeted her warmly. You've got quite a story, Elena, he said. Your voice has something special, real emotion. Listeners love that, she blushed slightly. Thank you. I just try to sing what I feel. During the interview, Peter asked about her journey, her inspiration, and her upcoming shows. She spoke honestly about her struggles, her doubts, and how music had helped her through it all. When the song played live on air, she sat quietly, listening to her own voice through the speakers. It felt surreal. She remembered the days she sang alone in her room, afraid no one would ever hear her. Now people all across the town and beyond were listening. After the interview aired, her phone didn't stop buzzing. Messages poured in from people who said her story inspired them. Some wanted to know when her next show was. Others just wanted to thank her for reminding them not to give up on their dreams. Elena read every message with tears in her eyes. She realized that music wasn't just about sound, it was about connection. But success, even small success, came with its own challenges. Some people in town who used to ignore her now treated her differently. A few were supportive, but others whispered that she was getting too proud, that she was forgetting where she came from. Elena tried to ignore it, but the words stung. She had always been humble, and the idea that people thought otherwise hurt her deeply. One day, while working at the diner, she overheard two customers talking at a nearby table. She's good, sure, one said, but she's not that special. Just lucky, that's all. Elena pretended not to hear, but her chest tightened. After her shift, she went to the park and sat by the fountain, staring at her reflection in the water. The doubts crept back in, the same ones she thought she had buried long ago. Maybe she wasn't as talented as people thought. Maybe it was all just luck. That night she called her mother. Mom, she said quietly, what if I'm not good enough? What if all this ends tomorrow? Her mother's voice was gentle. Then you'll still have your gift, sweetheart. You'll still have your voice. That's something no one can take from you. Those words comforted her. She realized that no matter what others said, she couldn't let fear steal her love for music. A few days later, Daniel told her about another opportunity. There's a charity event in the city next month, he said. They're inviting local artists to perform. It's a bigger crowd, more exposure. Are you interested? The idea thrilled and scared her at the same time. The city meant a bigger stage, more people, more pressure. But she remembered Daniel's words, to sing like it could be her last time. So she said yes. When the night of the event arrived, the venue took her breath away. It was a small theater, but to her it looked massive. The lights, the sound, the crowd, it was all so different from her little town. Backstage, she could feel her heart racing. Her hands trembled as she held the microphone. Daniel came up beside her. You'll be great, he said with a calm smile. Just do what you always do, sing from the heart. She nodded, trying to steady her breathing. Thank you, Daniel, for believing in me. He chuckled softly. I didn't have to believe in you. You made me believe. When her name was announced, she stepped onto the stage. The lights hit her face, warm and bright. For a moment, she couldn't see the crowd. She could only hear the quiet hum of the microphone and the pounding of her heartbeat. She took a deep breath and began to sing. The song was slow and emotional, one she had written about finding light after darkness. Her voice carried through the theater, soft at first, then stronger with each note. The audience listened in silence, completely still. Some closed their eyes, others smiled softly. She could feel the connection. Her voice reaching people she had never met, touching hearts she would never know. As she reached the final chorus, she poured everything into it, all her fear, her hope, her gratitude. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. She opened her eyes and saw faces shining with emotion. For a moment, she just stood there, taking it all in. After the show, people lined up to meet her. Some wanted autographs, others wanted to thank her for her music. A little girl came up holding her mother's hand and said shyly, "I want to sing like you one day." Elena knelt down and smiled. "Then you should sing every day. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't." The girl nodded seriously, and Elena saw a reflection of herself in those young eyes. When the night ended and the crowd left, Elena stood alone on the empty stage. She looked out at the rows of seats, still feeling the energy of the people who had been there. She thought about everything: Mr. Harlan's harsh words, the small diner performances, Daniel's encouragement, her mother's faith. Every moment, good or bad, had brought her here. As she packed up her things, Daniel walked over, smiling. "You did it again," he said. "You had them in tears." She laughed softly. "I almost cried myself." He looked at her thoughtfully. "That's what makes it real. People don't want perfect, they want truth. And you give them that." Later that night, back home, Elena sat by her window again. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and she could still feel the echo of her song in her chest. She picked up her guitar and started humming a new melody. It was peaceful, hopeful, a song about moving forward. As the night grew quiet, she smiled to herself. She didn't know where the road would lead next, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her voice, and this time she wasn't going to let anything silence it. The morning after the city performance, Elena woke up to sunlight spilling through her curtains and the faint sound of birds outside. For a moment she lay still, half expecting it all to have been a dream. But then she saw the bouquet of flowers on her bedside table, the ones she'd been handed after the show, and it hit her again. It was real. She had done it. People had cheered for her. Strangers had cried. And for the first time she had felt like she truly belonged on a stage. But success, even the small kind, didn't mean life stopped being ordinary. After breakfast, she went back to her job at the diner. The same smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. The same bell rang when customers came in. Some of the regulars congratulated her, smiling with pride. Others just ordered their usual meals, pretending not to notice anything different. That was fine with her. She liked the balance, the normal and the extraordinary living side by side. As the weeks passed, more opportunities began to appear. A local newspaper wanted to do a feature on her. A small music festival sent an invitation. Daniel helped her manage everything, keeping track of dates and songs. It was busy, but in a good way. Every new chance felt like another door opening. One evening, after rehearsal, Daniel sat across from her in the cafe where they often met. He stirred his coffee, then looked at her seriously. "You're doing great, Elena," he said. "But I think it's time we think bigger." She frowned slightly. "Bigger?" He nodded. "You've been performing locally for months. You've built a following. What if we record an album? Nothing fancy, just a few songs, something people can hold on to." Elena's heart raced at the thought. An album, her own songs on a real CD, maybe even online. "Do you really think I'm ready?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled. "You've been ready for a while. You just needed to believe it." They spent the next few weeks planning. They found a small studio in the city with an owner who loved her story and agreed to help for a discounted price. Elena spent long hours there, sometimes singing the same verse over and over until she felt it was right. It wasn't easy. There were days when her voice cracked, when exhaustion made her doubt herself, but every time she heard the playback, she felt a little closer to her dream. Recording her songs taught her something new about herself. On stage, she could lose herself in the moment. In the studio, every note mattered, every breath was captured. It forced her to listen, to really listen to the emotions in her voice. And somewhere in those long nights between takes and tea breaks, she realized she was learning to trust herself more than ever before. When the album was finished, Daniel handed her the first copy. "Here it is," he said, smiling. "Your first record." Elena held it carefully like it was something fragile. Her name was written on the cover in simple letters. It felt surreal to see it printed there. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "Say nothing," Daniel said with a grin. "Just keep singing." The album release was small but beautiful. They held it in the same community hall where she had sung at the very beginning. Friends, family, and familiar faces filled the room. As she performed the songs from the album, she saw people singing along to the ones they already knew. Some wiped away tears. Some just smiled quietly, soaking it in. When it ended, she received a standing ovation. Her parents stood in the front row clapping with proud, tearful faces. Afterward, her father hugged her tightly. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You really did it." Elena smiled through her tears. "We did it," she said. "All of us." For a while, everything seemed perfect. The album spread slowly through word of mouth. Her songs were played on a few local stations. She even got messages from people in other towns saying they loved her music. Life was busy, joyful, and full of purpose. But success, as she had learned, also attracted new kinds of pressure. One evening, Daniel mentioned that a manager from a larger city had shown interest in meeting her. "It could be a big step," he said. "They handle a lot of up-and-coming artists." Elena hesitated. "Do you think that's a good idea?" Daniel leaned back, thinking. "It could be, but we need to be careful. The music world can be tough. People don't always have your best interest at heart." Still, they agreed to take the meeting. A week later, they traveled to the city again. The manager, a confident man in a sleek suit, greeted them warmly. He praised Elena's voice, her story, her charm. "You've got something special," he said. "With the right backing, you could go far. But we'll need to make some changes, small ones. More polished songs, a more modern look, maybe a few different styles to attract a wider audience." Elena listened quietly, trying to process it all. Something about the way he spoke made her uneasy. It wasn't that his ideas were bad, but they didn't sound like her. They sounded like something else, something less honest. After the meeting, Daniel looked at her. "What do you think?" She sighed. "I don't know, it's exciting but also scary. I don't want to lose who I am." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then don't. If something doesn't feel right, trust your gut." They turned down the offer. It wasn't easy, turning away from what could have been a faster road to fame. But Elena knew deep down that it was the right decision. She didn't start singing to be famous. She started because it made her feel alive. Still, doubts crept in. Late at night, she sometimes wondered if she'd made a mistake. Maybe she should have said yes. Maybe she was too afraid of change. But every time she performed, every time someone came up after a show to say her songs helped them through something, she remembered why she had chosen this path. Months passed, and she continued to perform, record new songs, and teach herself to play piano. Her audience grew little by little. One afternoon, while she was at the park, she saw a group of teenagers singing one of her songs from the album. They didn't notice her watching, but she smiled to herself. That was all the proof she needed. Her music had found its way into people's lives. One day, Daniel brought her exciting news. "You've been invited to perform at the regional festival," he said. "It's one of the biggest events around. This could change everything." Elena froze. "That's huge," she whispered. "Do you really think I can do it?" Daniel smiled. "I know you can. You've been preparing for this since the first time you sang." The weeks leading up to the festival were filled with rehearsals and planning. Elena wanted everything to be perfect, but not in a forced way. She wanted it to be true to her, to the journey that had brought her there. The night of the festival arrived. The stage was enormous, lit with bright lights that stretched far into the crowd. She could see hundreds of faces waiting, expectant and excited. Her hands trembled as she held the microphone. She took a deep breath and remembered Daniel's words from long ago. "Sing like it could be your last time." The first notes of her song filled the air, soft and gentle. Then her voice followed, clear, heartfelt, unshaken. As she sang, memories flashed through her mind. Her first performance, the diner, the late nights recording, her mother's voice on the phone, the little girl who said she wanted to sing like her. All of it blended into one powerful moment. Halfway through, she noticed the crowd beginning to sway, some holding up their phones with lights shining like tiny stars. The energy was overwhelming but beautiful. By the time she reached the final verse, she could barely hold back her tears. The last note lingered in the air, long and trembling. Then came silence. And then applause. Loud, thunderous applause that echoed through the night. Elena stood there, breathless, her heart full. She smiled through tears, realizing that this feeling was everything she had dreamed of and more. It wasn't about fame or perfection. It was about connection, about courage, about never letting anyone make her feel small again. When she walked off stage, Daniel met her with open arms. "You did it," he said, his voice full of pride. You made them feel every word. Elena laughed, wiping her eyes. We did it, she said softly. That night, as she looked up at the stars above the city, she whispered a quiet thank you to the world. To everyone who had believed in her and to herself for never giving up. The morning after the festival felt quiet, almost unreal. Elena sat by her window, watching the golden light spill over the rooftops. Her phone was buzzing with messages, people congratulating her, sharing clips of her performance, and writing how her song had moved them to tears. It all felt overwhelming, but in the most beautiful way. She thought back to that first night she sang in front of a crowd, her hands shaking, her voice trembling. She smiled softly. She had come so far. Her parents came into her room, smiling with pride. Her mother held her hand and said, "You made everyone so proud last night. You showed them who you really are." Her father nodded, adding, "We always knew you had something special. But seeing you up there, it was like watching a dream come true." Elena hugged them both tightly. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. And she meant it. Their quiet belief in her had kept her going when she doubted herself. Later that day, Daniel called. "You're officially a sensation," he joked. "Your performance video is everywhere. People can't stop talking about it." Elena laughed in disbelief. "You're kidding." "I'm not," Daniel said. "Even the festival organizers called me this morning. They said it was one of the most emotional performances they've ever had. They want you back next year as a headliner." For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. The thought of being a headliner, a name people came specifically to see, was something she had never even dared to imagine. "That's amazing," she finally whispered. Daniel's voice softened. "You earned it, Elena. Every note, every tear, every moment you thought about giving up, it all led to this." Over the next few weeks, Elena's life changed in quiet, steady ways. She was invited to perform in new towns, interviewed by radio stations and featured in local newspapers. But she still tried to stay grounded. She still helped at the diner sometimes, still walked through town greeting the same people who had known her since she was a kid. Fame didn't change who she was, it just gave her story a bigger stage. But amidst all the excitement, there was one thing she couldn't stop thinking about. The man who once told her she would never be enough. She hadn't seen him since that painful day, but she sometimes wondered what he would think if he saw her now. Would he be proud? Embarrassed? Would he even remember her? Part of her wanted to prove him wrong, to show him how much she had grown. But another part realized she didn't need his validation anymore. The stage, the music, the people who believed in her, that was enough. One afternoon, while she was preparing for a small concert in her hometown, she heard a familiar voice from behind. "You've really made something of yourself." She turned, and there he was, the same man who had once doubted her. Time had softened his features. He looked older, maybe even a little humbled. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, "I saw your performance on television. You were incredible." Elena nodded politely. "Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "I was wrong back then. About you. You had something I didn't see. I guess I was too proud to admit it." Elena took a deep breath. The old pain flickered for a second, but quickly faded. "We all make mistakes," she said gently. "I just had to find my own way." He smiled faintly. "Well, you found it. I'm glad you didn't listen to me." As he walked away, Elna felt a quiet peace settle in her heart. The girl who once cried in her room, wondering if she'd ever be enough, no longer needed anyone's approval. She had faced her fear, found her voice, and turned her pain into something beautiful. That evening, the small concert began. The community hall was full. Friends, neighbors, teachers, people she'd grown up with. It was where everything had started, and now it felt like coming full circle. When she stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She smiled, looking out at all the familiar faces. "This song," she said softly, "is for anyone who was ever told they weren't enough. Because you are." The music began, slow and gentle. Her voice floated through the hall, warm and sincere. Every word carried years of emotion, struggle, hope, forgiveness. She wasn't just singing a song. She was telling her story. Halfway through, she saw her parents sitting in the front row, her mother wiping her eyes. Daniel stood at the back, nodding along, pride written all over his face. And somewhere near the doorway, she saw the man who once doubted her, standing quietly with his hands in his pockets, listening. By the time the song ended, The crowd was on their feet, applauding. Some people were crying, others smiling through tears. Elena bowed, her heart full. This wasn't just a performance, it was a moment of truth, of healing. After the concert, as people came up to congratulate her, a young woman approached shyly. "Your song helped me," she said softly. "I've been going through a hard time, and hearing you sing made me feel like maybe I can get through it too." Elena smiled, touched. "You can," she said. "You're stronger than you think." That night, when everyone had gone home, Elena stayed back for a while, sitting on the edge of the stage. The lights were dim, the room quiet. She looked around, remembering how nervous she had once been to stand there. Now it felt like home. Daniel came over and sat beside her. "You did it again," he said with a smile. Elena laughed softly. "I just sang." "You didn't just sing," Daniel said. "You made people feel something. That's what real artists do." Elena looked out at the empty seats. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" "All the time," Daniel said. "And the best part is, you're just getting started." She smiled, feeling a mix of peace and excitement. For the first time in her life, the future didn't scare her. It felt open, full of promise. The months that followed were full of new beginnings. Elena started working on her second album, writing songs inspired by the people she met and the emotions she had experienced. Each lyric felt like a piece of her soul. She collaborated with local musicians, giving others a chance the way Daniel had given her one. The music wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever dared to dream. As her song spread further, invitations started coming in from other cities, even other countries. Her story had reached people she'd never met, in places she had never been. But no matter how far she traveled, she always came back home to the diner, the park, the small town that had shaped her. One quiet evening, months later, Elena stood backstage before a big performance in another city. Thousands of people were waiting outside. The lights, the cameras, the noise, it was everything she had once dreamed of. Yet beneath it all, she still felt like that same girl who sang because it made her heart feel lighter. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered a small prayer of gratitude. For the struggles, the lessons, the people who believed in her and even the ones who didn't. They had all played a part in her journey. When she walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted in cheers. She smiled, lifted the microphone, and began to sing. Her voice filled the air, strong, pure, and full of life. Every note told her story. The girl who had been told she would never be enough, who found her courage and proved that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the hardest places. As she finished the last song of the night, the audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. She took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for listening, for believing, for reminding me that dreams are worth chasing." And in that moment, surrounded by light, sound, and love, Elena knew this was only the beginning of a much bigger story. She didn't just find her voice, she found herself. And that, she realized, was the greatest song of all.